Hello, so in this short tutorial we are going to be taking a static and boring drum track, turning that into something that's a lot more dynamic and interesting. So we're going to be looking at some techniques, how we can keep things moving over the arrangement, but also just little tips and tricks that I've picked up over the years on how to make your drums have movement, keep them rolling, keep them interesting, and to how to process them and use effects to make them more exciting. So let's dive in and let's start with a boring drum loop and turn it into something interesting. Okay, so I've set up just a little 4-bar loop here, and it really is simple. It's basic. So that's the whole purpose. We're going to start with something simple, and I'd show you how you'd make some more interesting drums. So it's static, it's almost robotic, it's not got much depth, it's very dry. So first thing that I would look at, now there's two main things that I would do in this scenario. That is to add a few more layers and add some variation, and then afterwards we're going to look at adding some processing to keep things interesting. So let's just get some variation in there first of all, and there's different ways in which you can do this. So you can have some variation in your velocity, you can have some variation in the actual position of the drums themselves. But what we're going to do is start by doing that. So adding in little extra bits like that. So let's extend this pattern out into a 16-bar loop, and then we can start to add a bit more variation in other areas. So before I do that, actually, I'm going to take those first two. So, and then towards the end of the 8 bars, we might have like a change the velocities like this, and velocity is a really good way to get some variation. If you don't have variation in your velocity, it's going to feel really robotic. So what I also want to do is add in a snare, and we're going to use something called like little ghost notes. So I'm just going to type in snare. I might go for like a bit of a sort of a garagey snare maybe. Something like this. I'm going to just load in a load of snares onto a drum rack, and we're adding extra layers in here to just fill things out a little bit. We will add some perks as well. Okay, so ghost notes are a little quiet, less velocity notes in between the main notes. So let's just So what I'm going to do also to add a bit of a human feel before I start adding in these ghost notes is I'm going to select all of the MIDI, and I'm going to go into the groove pool here, and I'm going to just add some swing. So I quite like that being on the beat, and then you've got those little ghost snares in between. So we're just going to be building and experimenting really to see where this goes. I'm going to go into, just call this snare. I'm going to go into the drums here. Now, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add in some manual velocity variation just on all of the drums, just like this, so that we've got the feeling that it's being sort of played in rather than it being. It's very subtle. And then what we can also do after that is we go in and we add some random velocity as well, really subtle. Towards the end of the bars, we can start adding in little fills and flicks. And then variation on the last bar like this. And I think we also need to think about adding in some extra hats. So if we're wanting groove, we want to be having the hats playing off each other. So we've got that swing on there now, which will really work nicely for a nice little drum loop like this. So what I'm going to do actually, just get a few different hats in there. Just looking for some nice sounding hats basically. Okay, so let's just see if we can get a bit of pattern going in. So we're getting a bit of variation on that now. So we might start to think about processing. And the first thing I'm going to do is shorten this kick. Maybe try pitching it up. It's quite nice. And I think the EQ needs to go on there. So we're just rolling out some of that super subbiness really. Nice, and some of the tops as well, so we're getting rid of some of that noise. I really want it to cut through in the mix, so I'm going to use the transient shaper. This transient master. Push the attack, reduce the sustain. It's going to cut through nice out. So the drums are still pretty dry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to place them in their own room by inserting a return track like this, and then I'm going to use a reverb. Perhaps I'm going to use the H reverb for this, and we could just give it its own space by doing so, and then send each of the elements to it. So starting with the hats. So if we were to turn that off, that's really dry. Still a little bit too much reverb, I think, on that, so I can just pull back on it. And I'm going to put an EQ after it, just to make sure that we've got no stuff with reverb on, past about 400 usually I do. So already we're starting to see progress in how these drums are fitted together, and I'm going to get like a main snare roll in there as well. So let's just find, let's go into a drum rack, and then I'm going to find a nice snare just to okay, I'm going to shorten the decay of that, have a bit of a fade out on it, and then towards these sections we can start thinking about taking potentially the kick out and have like a bit of a Push the transposition up, shorten it even more, I think. Maybe get a crash in there too. At the start of the bar. What I'm going to do there, so I've got a bit more control over it. I'm going to set that up with the drum rack as well, like this. And then we can actually go in, shorten, crash, and we can also, it's more easy. It's easier to then transpose it and things like that. Get some delay on there. Some EQ as well. So I'm going to start to think about percussion now, and I want like a rim shot or something. So let's have a look and see if we can find a nice sounding rim shot. We'll grab that one for now, but I'm going to keep looking for little perks as well. So if we just have like a bit of a pattern. Just put in like a little pattern like this. And we're going to start to think about how we can make that more interesting. So we might add something in like the Echo Boy from Sound Toys. I quite liked that first one that we were using, but it's just a case of flicking through and finding things that. So we've got this little texture that we can use. Send it to a big reverb send. And what I always find it nice to do when I'm at this stage is start to think about layering some loops, and I've got some little loops here that might work. Something like this, but we're only going to have this really subtly in the mix. So first things first, what I always do is I put it into complex pro mode, and then I press Command and J, and that will put it into its own clip, and then we can then go back into beats and just reduce the transients. And I'm also going to pitch it up a touch, so you can hear that we're now fattening things up a little bit. Now, what I also want to do is get some EQ on it, because we've got an extra kick drum in there, and we only want the tops really from this loop. And then we can have a bit of variation by commanding and J in that, try and reverse. And then maybe double in. Like this. And just reversing that part. Send that to the reverb too. So we're starting to get a little bit of progress. So we're just going to keep going and keep building these drums. So what I want to do now is I still want to keep adding layers and adding some more movement into the drums. But like, I also feel as though there's scope to be adding in some effects chains down here. So this is something that I like to do quite often. So if I go in here and then do an insert and return track again, you can also do that by doing Command Option and T like that. But then we could just add some pretty crazy effects in there. So something like Crystallizer whilst we're on this using a few Sound Toys plugins. So this is really nice. So we might want to just do this, and then what we could potentially do is with all these percussive layers, if we group them together, we can then see what would happen if we experiment and send it to that to this insert. Little flicks and little details like that. So I'm just going to draw that automation in because it works quite nicely at the start of at the end of a section like that and into the next one. So if we bring it right down and then put it up like this. And then we could perhaps have that happening again, but like towards the end of the bar like this, just adding in these little variations. So then that's one just really simple effects chain we've got. Let's try another one. So if we were to maybe have like something like Timeless on there, but also then add something like Tornado in as well, we're going to get some really trippy little extra effects and fills like that. So I'm just going to pick something like this. And we've got all of these nice little sounds happening now. So it will work nicely as a build on this little section here. So I'm just going to close that lane of automation. So okay, cool. So now I've got some little effects in there that I quite like. We could keep going with that indefinitely and just keep adding loads and loads of extra layers. But what I also want to do now is create a new audio channel. And I'm going to go in and find some little breaks and fills and stuff like that that are going to fill out the drum section as well. So little loops. So if one pack that I use quite a lot recently for this sort of stuff is this Dance Mega add-on groove. So I leave the drums looping and then I find something that fits and I just chop it and we'll see if we can get something interesting. I'll show you what I mean. Yeah, so something like this on as a fill works really nicely. So what I'll do first of all, I will go in and we'll just get it in complex pro modes first, and then Command and J to consolidate. Then we'll go back in here, get the groove on. And then we could maybe try something like tremolator on there. So Sound Toys, as you can see, is my real go-to for processing my drums. We go into like the simple rhythms. You could get something gives it a bit of movement, and then we can perhaps look at processing that with some delay as well. I actually think without the tremolator it works. Little flicks like this and just reverse that. And you can also do little tricks like these sort of slip kicks and things like that. So if we just receive the audio from the kick channel like this, click record, and then just reverse that. So I think we've taken a really sort of pretty dull loop that's quite static and made it a lot more exciting. So there's a few other tricks that I wanted to, well, not really tricks, they're just techniques that I use. So if we get another drum rack in there, we get like a nice sort of almost sharp sounding hat that's quite thin. And then we'll go in and we'll maybe think about adding in some triplets and just some other sort of nice top end. So if we go in here, we right click, got the option then to reduce it to 32, and then we can just like add these little triplets in, which sometimes sound nice if you get them right. So let's just have a play with those. Like that, that sounds pretty cool. You don't want to overdo it though. And then we might think about adding some phaser onto that so that we've got all of these different things happening and it's just a lot more interesting. Yeah, there we go. You want to be quite subtle with this. So let's get into the processing then. I think we've got some patterns that are interesting. And you can obviously add some more variation as you go across to, you can change things. You go across to like a 32 bar loop, and then you go in here and you start to think, right, what I want to do is I want there to be like a kick roll here as well towards the end. So what I want to do is I want to go in and start with a bit of EQ, and I always go in and I take out all that unwanted muddiness in the bottom end that it's not necessarily muddiness, it's just if we have a build up. So with this clap, got all this down here, look. So if I just sweep through, you'll hear those, all of those low frequencies. You listen really carefully. That is absolutely not what we need in the mix, because that's just going to build up and we're going to get muddiness in the mix. So when I'm EQing, I'm going with this here, turn that off, and then I'm going to sweep through to the point where it starts to affect the sound, and then I pull back a little bit. So let's just go. Nothing around there, it's cool. We've still got the main body of the clap in there. We've got rid of all this unwanted muddiness in the bottom, all this unwanted low frequencies in the bottom. Let's do the same with the... We also need to balance the levels here. Let's have a look. Okay, now let's go in and let's do the same with the EQ. And the hats. Now it's a little bit more complicated with the hats. What I like to do is I use Pro Q3 for this. Again, we swipe through. Got this resonance here, which sounds pretty awful. Okay, that's much better. It's still quite harsh, so I'm going to add in a decimor on here just to take out some of the top end. EQ after that. See what it is. So if I turn the decimal off. So if I turn the decimal off, look at what's happening to the frequencies at the top there. Got all this going on. If I turn it on, there we go. We've got like a nice analog sounding hat. I definitely need some of the bottom end taken out, so let's get an EQ on it. I also, with this, want to just sweep through with a filter just so it's got even more variation. So let's just have a listen. Okay, sounds much better. And we'll also add a micro shift onto that so that we can give it some stereo. Okay, cool. And I'm going to take the snare roll out of the group because it's sending it to the effects chain. I don't want it to be in there. So let's go in again, do a little bit of EQ. So let's just have a look at this and see. I'm going to get the Saturn on there, and I want to make this a little bit brighter. So you could do multi-band processing with this. So we'll push up the highs. Add a bit of drive, and press it. Pull out those lows. So we've got so much more going on now here, and we've just processed it only a little bit. So let's go. So let's listen to what we've got so far from that very basic static loop to this. Before we do that though, I'm gonna get a better clap. So if we just go into this pack here and we go something like that. There's a bit of noise on that, but we'll reduce the decay. So there's a bit of delay on this reverb, which I did like at first, but I'm not 100% sold on it. That clap's cutting through a lot better. I'm just going to also add a little bit of transient master onto the clap, so it cuts through. I'm going to try swapping out the kick as well, just for something that's a little bit tighter that's going to punch through, because I think that one is what's causing the bit of muddiness. Get a bit of decimal on that as well, on the crash. And then yeah, there you have it. So what I'll do after this is just add a little, just bring the gain down a bit. I'll add a bass line as well for context, just a little loop or something in a sec. And then another thing I like to do with my drum group, as you may have seen before, I also like the decapitator. Just if I add that onto the drum group like this, you'll hear a difference. So we're getting a lot more fatness out of it. Just got to check my gain stage in. So 530. I'm just going to get a utility in there, make sure that we're so we've got more power and volume out of the drums by adding in the decapitator. It just makes them sound louder and fuller and glued together, but we haven't actually gained that much volume. if anything, we probably need to back off a little bit. And then just what I like to do is have a look at what the EQ is saying on the drum channel. So we've got some stuff kicking around the bottom. I'm just going to get rid of that. So this is just a few little ways that I would create more interesting drums from like a static loop through the use of effects and adding in extra notes. And I've only just sort of dived in over the space of like 30-40 minutes really, but you could really go into depth and set up some LFOs and things like that. And I'm going to go into a bit more depth in some more videos, but I'm listening to drums and I'm listening to where there's, in the tracks that are sent for feedback, there's not much variation going on, but you can see here, it's quite easy to just build. Let's try and get a little bass line in there as well, so we can hear what it sounds like. 10 points for anybody that can recognise the bass line and what tune that's come from. It's straight from a sample pack. I really want to finish this track now, so I'm going to go and do that. But I hope that tutorial has been useful, and let us know if there's been some little nuggets in there that's been useful for you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video.